convicted felons who were on parole at the time. So why did the board release men who might be capable of such a brutal crime? The Connecticut representative, Mike Lawlor, is the co-chair of the State Judicial Committee and a professor of criminal justice at the University of New Haven. Mike, thanks for joining us. You know this case from front to back. Were you outraged when you first learned that these men were on parole?
Well, it's not just that they were on parole. It's the fact that there was information that the parole board and the Department of Corrections should have had that would have changed the decision-making here. You know, this is a classic case of the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Since that time, there's been a lot of changes, but in retrospect, it's clear that things would have happened differently had the system worked as designed.
So that's you say one hand not knowing what the other was doing. Is that how the parole board saw fit to release them?
Well, these two guys, the younger guy is the more dangerous guy, the clearly the potential future predator. He had been identified by many people in the system. For example, the sentencing judge in his case had said, this guy is a potential killer down the road. But that information never got to the Department of Corrections.
So how could it not get to the Department of Corrections? What went on that it didn't go there?
Well, it turns out Connecticut has this antiquated information system for police and prosecutors and parole officials, and they relied on photocopies and the U.S. mail when many other states do this electronically. And I think in this day and age, that's just not acceptable. So in the 3 years since the tragedy, the governor, the legislature up here have made these kinds of changes. So in the future, this won't happen. But clearly, in retrospect, this was probably preventable.
Can you talk about some of the changes, Mr. Lawlor?
Well, there's a lot of changes. You know, number one is state-of-the-art information system, so everybody has what they need in order to make the decisions. But beyond that, we've tried to focus in on repeat violent offenders. We've updated our 15-year-old 3 strikes and you're outlawed to focus in, including on these violent home invasion type situations. We've made it clear that is a violent crime, and people who are doing time for this aren't eligible for parole until they've done at least 85% of their time. But more importantly, we've tried...
Go on, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished with your thoughts.
I just want to continue. No, the most important thing is we want to give the frontline officials the tools they need to identify the needle in the haystack. Which offender, out of the thousands and thousands that come through the system, is a potential future murderer like this guy? There are warning signals. In this case, they were there. They just weren't available. They couldn't be seen by the people who needed to have them. So I think the information breakdown is probably the single biggest cause here, and we've taken important steps to change that.
Do these men deserve the death penalty?
Well, they clearly deserve it. Whether or not they're going to get it is an open question. You know, there's a lot of controversy up here about whether or not to abolish the death penalty. But for now, that's the most serious penalty we have, and clearly, in my opinion at least, these guys deserve whatever is the most serious penalty.
Connecticut Representative Mike Lawlor is also the co-chair of the State Judicial Committee and a professor of criminal justice at the University of New Haven. Thank you.
Okay, Don.
Just ahead here on CNN, over 1